Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today is our 10th lecture on microeconomics, and this will be about the 9th chapter of the Hill Myatt anti-textbook. This chapter deals with the government functions of taxation and its use for redistribution of income. So, the Quran describes the function of the government here, that if those people who are given authority, then they establish prayer and give zakat, and then they invite to the good and they forbid what is evil. This is what we are dealing with. What is the role of the government here? So first we briefly outline the lecture. So the main concept of the lecture is that one of the functions of the government, there are many others, but the one which we'll be focused on in this chapter is that government taxes people, it takes money away from some and also gives to others, so that basically it redistributes the income. So now the standard story which the textbooks tell you is that when you redistribute, that is you try to achieve equity, then you will harm efficiency. So if you take money away from some people, that will distort their incentives. So basically, the standard story is that the best way to get rid of poverty is to go for growth and forget about inequity, forget about poverty. Once you have growth and you have lots of money, then you will be able to give it to all the people. And so you will be able to fight poverty. On the other hand, if you try to achieve equity, then you will damage growth and there will be not enough to give to anybody. So you will end up not being able to help poverty even. So that is the basic story that the textbooks try to tell you. Now the anti-text provides us with counter arguments to this mainstream argument, which is what the economists are trying to tell you. So we start by discussing the purpose and the role of governments. So the Hill and Myatt say that in the market economy, there are these four functions. The first is that there is a legal system which is used to enforce contracts. And of course, in the Quran we have a direct order that Ya ayyuhallazina amanu ufu bil uqud, that O people who believe, obey your contracts. So there is this tension that actually if the people are fundamentally honest and trustworthy, then you don't need this legal structure. And if people are fundamentally untrustworthy, then you need the legal structure, and even that is not enough. So famous recent papers show, Zach and Mac, that trust is a very important component of growth, because when the society has a lot of trust, then you don't need this overhead of the legal structure. And on the other hand, if there is not enough trust is amanat. So amanatdari, which is what Islam teaches, is a very important component of growth. The second function of the government is to provide public goods, like public services, like handling the rivers and the canals and the energy and the communications and the defense and many things which are too big for the private sector. The third function, which is very important in a market society, is the market society is inherently unstable. It keeps going up and down, so the government is supposed to stabilize it, smooth out the business cycle. But none of these are a topic of this chapter. The topic of this chapter is that the market system creates a lot of inequality. It makes the wealthy wealthier and the poor poorer, And so one of the roles of the government is to try to smooth this out and try to create equity. Now, just for the sake of contrast, we look at what the Islamic economy asks the government to do. So the first thing is to establish prayer, which is basically has two components. One is to make sure that the people have character, integrity, and also to create community, because prayer is done in jama'ah. The second requirement is zakat, which means that taking care of the poor people by taking money away from the wealthy. Again, this is exactly the opposite of what the conventional message is saying, that you should not try to take money away from the wealthy, because that will distort incentives and reduce growth. Enjoin the right, prohibit evil. So that's basically what the ulama say. This means that you have to establish justice. You have to promote justice. You have to teach people to respect justice, and also to ensure justice in the economic, political, and social domains. And what does justice mean? Islam does not ask for equality, that everybody should have the same amount of money. It asks for equity, that everybody should have the same opportunity. That is all. In fact, Islam says that inequality will exist and will persist and is actually good. But everyone should have the same opportunity. That is, everyone should have education, health, basic needs, etc. Alright, so that's the introduction to what we are going to try to do. Now we start, because the book starts like this, by giving some data on taxes, transfers, redistributions, wealth and poverty, just to get an idea of what the picture is like. And this is, again, exactly the opposite of what the conventional textbooks do, because they never discuss the real world. They are always talking about models and equations. So here's the tax GDP ratio for a number of countries. This is taken from your textbook. So the taxes in Sweden are 50%. Half of the GDP is taxes. Denmark. So what do you know about Sweden, Denmark, Belgium, France, Finland, Norway, Austria, Iceland, Italy? These are all European Union countries. So why is the tax rate so high? Yes, these are all welfare states. They provide a lot of benefits. Basically, more or less in European Union, it was guaranteed that even if you don't have a job, and everybody can live and eat and enjoy your basic needs. As opposed to this, this goes down to US, which has 27%, and Mexico even less. So in the US, which is a stark contrast from European Union, there is much less social service and support. US is sort of the main place where the fundamentalist capitalism is there, that we should follow it, pure capitalism without any social support. So correspondingly, the number of poor and the conditions of the poor in the US are the worst relative when compared with the rich countries of the world. So I looked up some other ratios for countries in our part of the world. So we find that Kuwait has only 1.5, Iran has 6, Pakistan is at 16.8, Thailand at 7. So you see, we are always seeing in the press complaints and discussion about how Pakistan is a low tax country, but from this we don't see any such disaster. This is normal, par for the course, and actually, as we will see, this idea that we should raise taxes is not a good idea for various reasons. But maybe not this lecture, because we are not concerned with that. So what do we learn from this? Well, Kuwait and other countries in the Middle East, they have a lot of oil money, so they don't need revenues for tax, and they can provide social services to the public and run the government without taxation, so they do it. Iran also has a lot of oil money. Bangladesh has a very low ratio, I don't know why. Sri Lanka, Indonesia. Turkey has 25%, China has 28%. Now, so this taxation is one important element of the revenue which the government earns. And so the next thing is what do they do with this revenue? So there are basically two ways which are important for the topic, which is redistribution. One is direct income transfers. This is like negative income tax program. You give money to the poor people. So we have such a program here. BISP is a negative income tax program where poor people directly receive cash payments from the government. The other and more important and usually larger part of the budget is providing social services. So you provide health services, educational services, and so all of this is also transferred, but it is not directly cash in the pocket, but it provides something similar to that by providing social support to the poor. So these are the two major elements of how the government takes money from the rich and provides services to the poor. So now one important issue that we need to study before we go on is how do we measure inequality, because this is the main topic. So actually one of the standard methods is the Gini coefficient and the Lorenz curve, and I have given you an assignment on how to do it yourself so that you have a real nitty-gritty, deep understanding which you don't get by looking at pictures. But anyway, here is the picture. So basically what you have to do is you have to arrange the households in the order, rank them according to income from the lowest to the highest. So now you look at the bottom 50% and you ask how much of the total pie, what is the share that they have in the total pie. So if everybody has exactly the same income, then the bottom half and the top half would have exactly the same amount, but that's obviously not going to be the case. And so the bottom half will have less. That's what the Lorenz curve shows. How much do they have? So here in this curve, they have about 20% of the total share of income. So the top half has 80% of the income and the bottom half has 20% of the income. So the Lorenz curve goes through the 20% point. And then at each share, at 60%, you can find out what is the bottom, how much does the bottom 10% have, how much the bottom 20% have, and so on. And so all of these are points on the Lorenz curve, and if you join them up, you get the Lorenz curve. And the gap between the Lorenz curve and the flat diagonal line, that is the amount of inequality, and you measure this area to calculate how much inequality there is. So when you do the exercise, inshallah, you will get a better understanding of what this is about. So there is the again some data. So we find that this is ordered in Gini coefficient. So according to this, the Gini coefficient is 0.247, which is small in Denmark, also Japan, and then it keeps going up. US has according to this, has a 40% or 41% Gini. Mexico has 46%. So these are higher. India has 37%, and Brazil and South Africa and Colombia, they have high inequality. You know that in South Africa there was a dual economy with the whites having all of the money and power and the blacks being suppressed. So even after the revolution and the change, the society remains quite unequal, which means that there is high inequality. Now, there is another way to measure inequality, which is to just take the ratio of how much the top 10% have to the bottom 10%, and that's also given here. One thing that should be clear is that these two measures are not necessarily always in accordance. One society can be better in terms of Gini, but worse in terms of this other measure. There are many different ways of measuring. And then there is top 20% to bottom 20% also. I have gotten this same data for some other countries not in that table. So in Pakistan, the ratio of top 10% to bottom 10% is only 6.5, which is fairly good compared even to the Netherlands. Our Gini coefficient is 30%, which is not too bad, and it's better than UK and much better than the US and better than India. So these are just some numbers that we look at to see what the data is telling us. The key thing that I want to point out here is that inequality is a multi-dimensional concept. This is very important because people don't understand the meaning of multidimensionality. What the meaning of multidimensionality is that it cannot be reduced to a single number. And this is why inequality is a complex concept. You can describe one aspect of, like if I say describe person X, his build, what is he like? So I can give you the weight, I can give you the height, I can give you the measurements. Now I say, no, just give me one number. So I can give you the height plus the weight or some other index, but no one number will capture the complexity of the data. And this is a big mistake which, even very, very sophisticated people don't understand. I've devoted several lectures of this in my intro stats course. That you say, okay, give me the rank of the colleges. So actually every university is a very complex multi-dimensional object. They operate in many different dimensions. So just give me one number, every number will be a distortion. And so there is no way to actually rank universities correctly. There is a whole lecture on this in my intro stats course. But the point is that most people don't understand this point. They say that there must be a ranking, there must be a best university. But I'm trying to say there is no best university, because in different dimensions, for example, if you rank universities according to fees, which has the cheapest, then you will get a best university, which is the cheapest. If you rank them according to number of PhDs produced, that will give you another university. If you rank them according to the number of papers written by the faculty, that will be another. And all three are different, and you cannot merge them into one number which will give you the quality of the university. So the reason and similarly, inequality is also a multi-dimensional concept. You cannot represent it by one number. Okay, so now one more thing that is important is that there are two different dimensions. One is the income dimension, and the other is the wealth dimension. How much assets do people have? So usually there are lots of inequality in income, but even more inequality in wealth. So these are some figures about the inequality in wealth. And when you look at the wealth, you see, when you look at the income, the Gini coefficient was 40%, as we saw. When you look at the wealth, the Gini coefficient is 80%. It is much higher. So there is a lot more inequality in terms of wealth relative to the inequality in terms of income. In particular, US has the highest income and wealth inequalities in the wealthy part of the world. And In the right panel, just to understand what does it 80% mean, it means that if you take $100 and you give, there are only 10 families, and so you give $80 to one family and distribute the, I see it says, 81 means that you give $90 to the one family and everybody else gets $1, then the Gini coefficient of this is 81. And so this is roughly what the income distribution in the USA looks like, and that's what the wealth distribution, not the income distribution. This picture also shows on the right hand side what has been happening. The red line is the income of the bottom 5%, which has gone down by about 2% from 1973 to 2013, while the income of the top 5% has grown by about 36% over the same period of time. So this shows the increasing inequality. The rich are getting richer and the poor are not making any gains in the US. Now, we see that one part of the issue is who are the wealthy, how much do they have, and the other part is who are the poor and how much do we need to give to them. So there are many, again, poverty is again a multidimensional phenomena, and there is no one way to measure. Among the economists, it was thought for a long time that poverty is just lack of income. So if somebody has less money than you put down a cutoff, the standard cutoff used to be $1 a day. So if you earn less than $1 a day, you are poor. If you earn more than $1 a day, then you are not poor. So this has been, the concept of multidimensional poverty has said that this is not a valid way to measure poverty, because poverty occurs in many different areas. This you may call income poverty, but there are also many other dimensions of poverty. So people can have income, but they may still be poor in other dimensions, or they may have low income, but they may not be poor, deprived in other dimensions. So anyway, one of the ways to measure poverty is to say that anyone with less than half the median is the middle, and then half of that is the bottom quarter in some sense, that we will call poor. So if you look at the number of people in households with less than half of the median, these are then the poor. And so if you look at Denmark, that has only 2.4% children who are living in poor families by this criteria, whereas in the US it is 20%. Showing basically the effect of the free market in the US and social democracy in European Union. Much better welfare benefits in European Union. Now this is the main topic. What does the government do? Basically, it takes taxes and then it redistributes. So what's the effect of this redistribution? One way to measure the effect is to ask how many points are reduced by how much does the Gini coefficient change? So I think the bars are the changes for income distribution, and the black dots are the wealth, or something like that. So you can see that, for example, Korea, the taxes do very little to change the Gini coefficient for both income and wealth. Korea is the smallest. Whereas in Denmark, which is the largest bar, the government's intervention by taking taxes and giving it to the poor in some sense creates the largest change. The Gini coefficient changes by about 15%. So it has the biggest impact on on the distribution inequality. And in the middle you have other countries. So for example, US is there in about the 6th, 7th country after Chile, Japan, Poland, France, Austria, USA. So the USA does not do a very good job of income distribution. It does better than Korea, is better than China and Japan in terms of redistributing income, because more impact on the Gini coefficient. In terms of wealth, China and USA is worse in that the wealth redistribution is under the blue bar, contrary to the normal pattern. Alright, so that was the discussion of the data. Now we come to the main topic, which is that basically what Hill and Myatt are saying is that your conventional economics textbook has a strong bias against equity. The textbook will say, and this is the message in all textbooks, that you should not try for equal income distribution. You should try for maximizing efficiency. Efficiency is very important. And the textbook promotes the idea that our primary policy goal as economists should be to maximize the growth. As far as the equity is concerned, that's a normative question. That's not our job to worry about it. This is one of the messages which the textbooks will give you. Another message which is very strongly conveyed to you by textbooks is the trickle-down. Now, the trickle-down has become very, very unpopular, so nobody uses this. And even if you say to people that you are talking about the trickle-down, so people will deny it, and even textbooks say that no trickle-down. But actually, the message continues to be trickle-down. And so what's the trickle-down? It says that if we just try to maximize growth, that is, we create a huge amount of wealth, it will automatically benefit the poor. This is the trickle-down argument. And it continues to be made even though the words are not used, but the same argument. So basically the argument I've already spelled out is that if we should strive to maximize growth, if we try to maximize, if we try to be equitable, we try to give money to the poor, this will hurt growth, and in the long run the poor will be hurt by this, because if you have no growth, then you will not be able to feed your poor. So even for the job or the goal of equity, of providing for the poor, you should still try to maximize growth. So this is the main argument, and we will now look at the arguments for this and the counter arguments that we are going to. So basically the anti-text is documenting this bias, and we are making arguments that this argument is fundamentally wrong. We should be trying for equity, and efficiency is not really all that important. So exactly the opposite is true. Equity is all important, efficiency is not important. And if we try for equity, we will actually either improve efficiency or not harm it. So the Hill and Myatt chapter focuses on making three main points: that the textbooks are biased, efficient, and how are they biased? They discuss efficiency throughout the text. They don't mention equity or income distribution, except maybe in the late parts. So that's one part, documenting. The second part is that actually, since people have been studying this issue, we have found that there is strong empirical and theoretical support that there is no equity efficiency trade-off. That is, if we try for equity, it will not actually hurt efficiency, contrary to the arguments being made in textbooks. I would like to add to that the experience of Mehboob al-Haq, which I have discussed in some other articles and other places, that when he tried for efficiency, we got the 22 families, and then he realized that this was the wrong idea, that human beings are the means and ends of growth. There is no point in efficiency if you are not feeding your people. And what he says is even more, that if you feed your people, they will create the growth. So the idea that first we create growth, get money, then give it to the people is wrong and opposite to what is needed. If you feed the people, they will create the growth and prosperity that you're looking for. And prosperity, it means being able to feed your people, not something else. And so one of the things, so that's the second point. The third point is actually that inequality itself is extremely harmful. It leads to shorter lives and bad health and many other damaging consequences. So it's not that inequality is something we should tolerate while we're trying for growth, because inequality itself causes a lot of damage. So these are the three main points of this lecture. So the argument, the first and primary argument which is made in economics textbooks is that the scarcity is the fundamental problem of economics and not inequitable distribution. So what are we trying to say? What we are trying to say here is that yes, okay, we should try to reduce poverty, but poverty is caused because there is not enough goods. And if we try to increase the wealth, only then we will be able to feed the poor. Now this argument is completely wrong. At this time on the planet, the planetary wealth is more than enough to feed and educate and house easily and comfortably everybody. So there is no shortage, there is no scarcity. And people have been following this argument, this wrong argument, for more than a century now. And the wealth has grown enormously, but the poor are still there and they are still increasing. So the fact is that at any point, if we want to eliminate poverty, we can do so easily by just taking the wealth taking money away from the rich and giving to the poor. But now what economists do is they say that no, wants and needs are exactly the same thing. So if somebody wants, then there is scarcity. So for them, if a millionaire wants a fleet of Mercedes with 20 cars and he has only 15, then there is scarcity. So, and if a baby is dying because of lack of milk, that is also scarcity. And of the two wants, the billionaire's demand is more important because there is $1 billion behind it. So it will be, a market society will fulfill the billionaire's demand, whereas the poor child will not, because he has no money behind it. So his demand is not an effective demand. So this is what the theory says, that the poor don't have because there is not enough for all, and not because the rich have excess. So this is actually hiding the source of the problem. So don't worry about the inequality, worry about getting more. But this getting more solution has been followed for a century and it has not worked. So the fundamental problem is not scarcity, it is inequity. It is the fact that some people have a lot more money than they deserve. So the second argument which is made in favor of inequality is the leaky bucket argument, which is the equity efficiency trade-off. That if we try to promote equity, it's what the argument is that you take take water in a bucket from one place to another place. So the wealthy have the water, you take it from them and you try to give it to the poor, but the bucket has a leak in it. So you will lose a lot of money, lose a lot of wealth. So basically, if you try to fix the inequity, you will cause a lot of damage to efficiency. And there is a trade-off between equity and efficiency. So yes, according to the economists, we can do something, but we must recognize that we are going to be damaging the economy by trying to solve the problem of inequity. So the third set of arguments, which is basically similar, is that the theory of taxation says that taxes are always harmful and there are many harm that are done by taxation. So in order to do redistribution, first we have to collect money, and this process already damages the economy because there is the cost of collection of taxes, which is a lot of overhead. And then there's distortionary effects of incentives. That is, if people are working hard and making money and you tax it away, then they will not have incentive to work hard. At the same time, people who are not working and getting money, then they will not have incentive to work. So in principle, so for example, the argument in extreme form goes, suppose I provide everyone with a basic income, nobody will work for a living, and then our GNP will be zero, so you will eventually not be able to feed anybody. So we have to tolerate inequality, and we have to let people be hungry so that they have the incentive to work. So that's incentive effect. Then there's price distortions which are created by taxation. We have seen those, and we have seen how taxes can basically the supply and demand argument. If you put on taxes, then the prices will not be at the competitive equilibrium, and so you will have loss of efficiency. So taxation will cause you loss of efficiency, and efficiency is the single most important factor to reduce poverty. So we should not do taxation, because if we want to eliminate poverty in the long run, we should avoid taxes. So that's the argument. So now actually all of these arguments are wrong, but how do the textbooks persuade huge numbers of people that these are actually true? So the way that the textbooks operate is that they start by describing markets. Governments are not there. They don't explain that the government is actually necessary in order to allow the markets to operate. A market cannot exist if there is no government to back up the possibility, and basically do the contract enforcement, make sure that the products are correctly labeled, make sure that there is no fraud, deception. So there's a lot of background structure which the government provides, which enables the market to operate. So this part is omitted. So first of all, there are these markets which are operating in a vacuum and they are working perfectly. Then the government comes in and messes everything up. They try to put in minimum wages to give equity to the laborers, and they end up creating more unemployment. They try to put rent controls to make sure that people have housing, and they end up creating shortages of housing. And so basically this is the picture which is created by the textbooks. So they create the idea that the government is evil. And what are the good things that the government is doing with taxes? These are never mentioned, even though there are huge numbers of things that the government does with taxes, which is like in Pakistan, we have BIS, we have public hospital, we have public schooling. It is true that these are not very high quality, but this is all that the public has. So if we take it away, things will get worse. And actually people have tried it, and this has happened, that what happens when you allow the free market to operate is that the free market is driven by profit, so they try to make the maximum profit out of the poor people, and it causes a lot of damage. So the benefits of the governments are never mentioned. Similarly, taxation is mentioned as a problem and a problem and a problem. What are the advantages of taxation? These are never mentioned. So there is the argument, which is Robert Lucas, famous Chicago School free market economist. He in 2004 in his presidential lecture for the American Economist, he said that, we economists have solved the problem of depressions forever. So he also said this: of the tendencies that are harmful to sound economics, the most poisonous is to focus on distribution. So you should not even think about distribution. Why? It's very poisonous to think about. Why is it poisonous? Well, because it will harm the wealthy. But what he says is that no, he gives a reason for it. Because if we want to improve the lives of the poor, we should focus on growth. Growth is what will eliminate poverty. So if you try to do Yani, there is a logic behind what he's saying. He's saying that if you try to take money from the wealthy and give to the poor, you will damage the economy and ultimately the poor will not be able to eat. So this is a poisonous line of thinking. So there is a counter argument for this. And basically that's why these people, Juan Carlos Cordoba and Jean-Pierre Verdier, in an IMF paper, Lucas himself, the paper is called Lucas versus Lucas. So on the one hand, Lucas is saying that income redistribution contributes very little to welfare, growth contributes hugely to welfare. So they say, okay, let's look at, Lucas has also written a paper on how we can calculate welfare. So basically, they say that let's take his framework and let us ask what happens, compare welfare from growth and compare welfare from redistribution. So what they find is that using Lucas's own framework for measuring welfare, they find that the gains from redistribution are huge, gains from growth are very small. And why is that? There are three main reasons. Growth will occur in the future, the poor are dying right now. So the promise of heaven 10 years later is not worth much to them in terms of present relief. So growth is not very powerful as a remover of, as an increaser of welfare. The second thing is that the existing amount of inequality is huge. So because of that, the amount of welfare that is lost by the millionaire when you take away his last million is not even noticeable. But the amount of welfare that the poor man can get by giving him one extra piece of bread is huge. So again, so the impact of, because of massive inequality, if the situation was more equal, then it would not be true. But here, because the situation is so highly unequal, a small amount of redistribution buys you a huge amount of welfare. And that is why the gains from redistribution are high. And the third thing is that people themselves like to live in an equal society. So they have this preference for equity. So if you live in an unequal society, this itself is harmful to your welfare because you have envy and you have other problems which we will discuss later. So because of all these three factors, the gains from redistribution are very high, the gains from growth are very low. So basically, Lucas's own framework shows that what he is saying is not true, that if we do redistribution, we can get a lot more social welfare than we can do by doing growth, contrary to what all the economists are saying. So counter-argument 4 is that the inequality is the central problem. And basically, if we think about what are, here is an economy, the US economy, what is the main problem of this? So it's not that the growth is not occurring. It's that there is a huge amount of inequality. There are poor people in the USA who are in the lower areas. Their infant mortality rate are comparable to those in the worst countries in the world. They are living in a separate country. And similarly, their health outcomes, their life expectancy is 20 years less for the poor than it is for the rich. So basically, the class structure is very strong, and so if you reduced inequality, you would actually provide that is the central problem. So this is again opposite of what the textbooks are saying. The textbooks are saying the scarcity is the central problem, but we are saying that the inequality is the central problem. I have written my own paper on this issue, and I've said that if we think about it just from, instead of being brainwashed by economics textbooks, we say, okay, there's no economic theory anymore. Let's think about the economic problems. What is the problem that we would focus on? Well, I would say that naturally we would say that the hunger is the first problem that we should focus on. Try to make sure that everybody has enough food to eat. After that, we will think about the other problem. Now, this hunger is never mentioned in your economics textbooks. But and the fact is that there is enough food on the planet to feed everybody. There is no problem about that. This has been researched. So there is no scarcity when it comes to food. But still, so then the problem is, why is it that with enough food we are not feeding all the people who need food? So this is the problem that is worth studying, and doesn't have to do with scarcity. It has to do with distribution. Why isn't the food getting to everybody? So why does economics ignore these problems? Well, one of the reasons is that economists benefit hugely from capitalism. So you can say that these are the priests of the religion of capitalism. So they get a lot of prestige and power because they are the defenders of capitalism, because the theories that they have are designed to be a defense of capitalism. So they hold up the power structure in place, which allows the capitalists to earn immense amounts of money at the expense of the poor, and they defend it by saying that this is right and just, and this is how we should operate the world. And furthermore, they say that this is not a value judgment. We are not supporting the wealthy people. This is an objective, positive economic theory that we are saying. We have no value judgment. So actually what we are trying to do here is to expose the hidden value judgments. So one of these hidden value judgments is the Pareto Principle, which is mentioned by all the textbooks. That there is only one principle we don't have any normative principles. We don't have any morals. There's only one thing which everybody will agree on, they say, without actually discussing it in detail. If everybody is better off, then obviously the whole society is better off. So now, what does this say? There is the text, there is the appearance, and then there is the reality which is hidden behind the text. What is the reality? What is being said here is that don't think about any policy which takes money away from the rich to give to the poor, because that will hurt the rich. So, so once you accept the Pareto Principle, it doesn't seem like you have done anything very, very harmful. It seems like a very simple and common sense idea that, okay, let's try to make everybody better off. But hidden behind this is the idea that redistribution is not allowed. You cannot take money away from the filthy rich and give it to the starving children. Precisely. And if there's one man who has $1 trillion, everybody else is starving, the Pareto Principle says that do not take money from that man to give bread to the poor. Now, Islam says that in the wealth of the rich there is a right of the poor. So if there is a hungry person, then the rich person who has much more than what he needs, he must give that. So this principle, the Pareto Principle, is opposed to the Islamic principle. So here is the Pareto Principle. In situation A, we have 3 people who are relatively low income and 1 person who is rich. So now if we take, in situation B, we take the richest person and make him even richer. So now, according to the Pareto Principle, society is now better off. But there are many reasons to believe that this is not so. This is actually, in an article I've said that economic theories should actually be called ET 1%, economic theory of the 1%, because all of the theories that you learn are designed to favor the 1% against the 90%, even though they don't have this appearance. So Martin Feldstein is a famous economist, and he says that common sense Pareto Principle says that suppose we take the highest income people and we make them even wealthier, then obviously, according to the common sense Pareto Principle, everybody is better off, so society is better off. Now, I think such a change should be regarded as good, even though it increases inequality. So he is arguing in favor of the Pareto Principle. So now there are some people who say that this is wrong. And that's not true. The society is not made better off by this. So what is his argument? He says, well, these people are just spiteful egalitarians, that their arguments should be rejected. So he doesn't have any argument to make. He just calls them names, that these are people who are just bad people. Spiteful. You see, they are envious. Why should you envy? I mean, if the rich are made better off, you have not changed, so you should not have, you don't have any cause to worry. That's the argument. So society is better off and we should accept this principle. He says that this is a good thing to make the wealthy wealthier. So the counter argument to this is made by Stiglitz in The Price of Inequality. He says that inequality by itself is damaging. So if you increase inequality, you cause harm to society. So now this is the argument which economists don't accept. So first reason is that inequality is self-perpetuating. If you are born poor, you stay poor. So this means that there is no... And why does this happen? Because the system is rigged by the wealthy. The wealthy have power and they may ensure that their power is goes to their own class, and they ensure that the other classes cannot break into their so it's not equal opportunity. So because of this, so wealth doesn't mean that they are better off, they have more wealth, but they also have more power. This power idea is not considered by economics. So when you have a group of very wealthy people, they have power and they have power to exploit the poor. And they do so. And that's why more inequality is harmful. If somebody is only a little bit wealthier, he does not have the power to exploit the others. But if somebody is a lot wealthy, if he has more money than all the rest combined, he can buy all of them. And that's what happens. So the wealthy use their power to shape monopolies, to take favorable treatment for governments. We also have all of these exemptions from taxes going for millionaires and billionaires, while the public pays heavy taxes. And so not only is this morally wrong, but it also hurts productivity, as we will see. So again, the opposite of what the economic theory says is true. The economic theorists say that the wealthy produce their wealth because this is their marginal product, this is their contribution to society. So if you tax the wealthy, you will reduce their productivity, and therefore society will be damaged. So basically what Stiglitz says is that free markets are not the solution to this problem. The only solution is to regulate the markets, to control the power of the corporations, which otherwise will change the rules of the game to favor them. And this is actually what has been happening in the US. So this battle of equity versus efficiency continues to this day. These are all papers, 3 papers that I looked up in the recent, after 2000. So there is this paper by Dollar and Cray from the World Bank. World Bank say that we take a social welfare function which assigns weights to individuals on the basis of their income levels. And they take a 40-year cross-sectional panel and they calculate the social welfare, and they find that the most of the increase in the social welfare is due to growth, and the inequality doesn't matter. It doesn't increase social welfare. As opposed to this, there are 2 studies, one by Peter Lindert, which shows that if you spend 10% of GDP on social transformations, as in USA, or 33% as in Sweden, the effect on growth is 0. So what he is saying that even if you spend 1/3 of your GNP on social programs, you will not damage growth. This is exactly the opposite of the argument, and you will improve welfare by a lot. So on the one hand, Dollar Cray are saying that growth is the most important contributor, and if you go for equity against growth, you will lose a lot of welfare. The other study is that, again, OECD study says that inequality doesn't really affect GDP growth, and if you take active spending, which promotes, basically you try to get people jobs, then you will actually promote growth and not hurt it. So you take care of the welfare of the people by trying to actively interfere with the free market and find them jobs. You will promote growth instead of hurting it. So these two are opposite sides of the argument. Now, why are they getting opposite results? This is very interesting. Basically, it's due to econometric fraud. One of the first books, very early book, is called How to Lie with Statistics, and today they have gotten very sophisticated about how we can tell lies using econometric techniques. So, the recent book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So that is also shows how you use distorted econometrics to convince people to follow the wrong policies. So if you go back to the dollar Cray study, what they say is that we use an income-weighted social welfare function. Now the other study, Lindert, and the other study before that, Lucas versus Lucas, they add all the people's welfare in an equal way, 1-to-1. Every person has the same weight. Now here, since you want to dollar Cray, they use income weighted. So if a person is a billionaire, his utility counts for $1 billion. If a person has nothing, his utility counts for 0. So now basically, with the income weighted social welfare function, you are looking at the welfare of the rich. So if you look at the welfare of the rich, obviously growth, now one of the things that we will see is that growth benefits the rich disproportionately. So if you have growth, then all of the gains from the growth are captured by the rich. So obviously if you look at the welfare of the rich, that is maximally enhanced by growth. And obviously it's going to be hurt by redistribution because the welfare of the rich will go down because their income will go down. So obviously this is built into the methodology that growth will bring you the maximum gains because gain is being measured as the gain of the rich only. So dollar Cray argument is biased, but it is a deceptive argument. They don't explain that they have done a trick to create this. So there are lots and lots of tricks like this. So Danny Roderick has a paper on trade policy and economic growth, Skeptic's Guide to Cross-National Evidence. So there is a lot of theory which says that export-led growth is true, that if we increase our exports, we will create growth. Now, there are hundreds of papers on this, all of them supporting this, and Danny Roderick goes through these papers and shows that all of them are wrong. So then the question arises, these are wrong on technical points. The econometrics done is shoddy, it makes mistakes, and there are many different kinds of mistakes that you can make. So this analysis is deep and difficult and requires knowledge of econometrics to understand what kind of tricks are being played. So now the thing is that the textbooks and the standard methodology that you are taught attempts to engage you at the lower level, that okay, here is my econometric evidence, you look at my econometric evidence and you try to find where I went wrong. So now this is binary thinking. This is my theory. Now is it true or false? And now the theory is so complex that most people cannot understand it. So you give up. You say, okay, since you are using so much mathematics and data and econometrics, you must be right because I don't understand any of it. So the counter to that is to move up one level. Who is saying what they are saying? This is meta level thinking. So why are there these 100 articles supporting export-led growth when there is no evidence for it? So then you have to think about what does the export-led growth do in terms of, is it teaching us that don't try to industrialize, try to produce things for the foreigners. Basically in Pakistan we have a huge, and suppose we have an option that we can produce high-tech items for exports to Europe, or we can produce very low-tech, very coarse, very crude items for our own population, which will not be exportable. So which one do you think will bring us more welfare? So it's obvious that if we make low-tech, crude items for the benefit of our own public, which will not be exportable, this will bring a lot more welfare to the people. This is exactly what was done in Japan and China when they were in the early process of industrialization, that they produced lots of very cheap products which were very poor quality, but they were affordable by their population. They were even affordable in the third world. So we bought those products because, and so what export-led growth tells you to do is to jump over the intermediate state and go straight to the manufacturing of the goods which are needed by US. Don't care at all about your own public, which cannot actually doesn't even have the money to pay for those goods that you will produce, which are high tech. And this is actually the widely believed now. So basically, theories which are popular for a reason, and you have to look for that reason which is not present in the argument. And once you learn how to do meta-level thinking, then you can counter very heavy-duty econometrics. So we have to, why is the World Bank interested in promoting growth and not in equity? There is a reason for that. The World Bank is actually designed, is a club of the rich countries, and it enforces the policies of the rich countries, and it doesn't want the poor countries to become richer, although it professes to do so. Although it claims that our policies are for your benefit, actually, when you examine them, you find that the World Bank, IMF policies are beneficial for the rich countries and harmful to the interests of the poor. All right, the sixth argument. Now, a lot of the arguments that are after the global financial crisis, there has been a huge amount of questioning of the capitalist and the economic theory. You can find statements of Nobel Prize laureates that all of economics theory is broken and it needs to be fixed everywhere. So there is a lot of discontent. Now this economic theory is a very powerful tool to support capitalism, and it seems to be breaking down. So the capitalists have already made preparations for the breakdown of economic theory, and they are preparing new arguments. So the latest argument, which is made in the core textbooks of economics, which is now the new thing, which also attacks conventional microeconomics. So you are taken in, this is their spy, which is and lots of people are attacking, so they are also attacking, and they have come up with a new argument. So the first chapter talks about the hockey stick. This is the graph. It says that standards of living have reached an unimaginable level. Average real incomes today are between 10 to 30 times larger than a century ago and 50 to 300 times larger than 2 centuries ago. So you look at this graph, which looks like a hockey stick. And so you see that from 1900 to 2000, we have had huge amount of growth. And so whatever the faults of capitalism, it works. It has produced a miracle. This is what they are saying. So don't mess with capitalism because it is producing a tremendous amount of growth. This is the argument now. Yeah. All right, we accept all the faults. It has inequality, it has poverty, it has this, that, other. Everything bad, we agree. But the miracle is there. You can't deny the miracle. People have. So this is the current state of art in defense of capitalism. So how can we fight against the hockey stick? So this is the hockey stick, another hockey stick of economic development. So it is not just wealth that has gone up. We have life expectancy has gone up, health has improved, nutrition has improved, infant mortality, everything that you're looking for, they have all improved. So what more can you ask for? All right, so we have a few faults, but all right. So first, we go back to the original hockey stick. We have to understand this hockey stick argument was first created in 1998 by an environmentalist, and this is the graph on the right-hand side, and it shows that in the 19th century, basically, there has been a dramatic increase in temperatures. This is the global warming. So basically, we are burning up the planetary resources at a rate that is so fast that that you can't. Basically, survival of humanity is currently threatened by the process of environmental change. So this was the original hockey stick, and so on the left panel, basically what is happening is that the planet is a finite planet. It has resources which were meant to feed us and our future generations. So what has been happening is that technology so powerful has been developed that they can destroy the whole planet. So basically they are taking all the wealth, extracting for all the future generations, basically killing the planet in order to bring benefits to today. It's like you can say that somebody who's using up all of his future potential earnings to have one day in the sunshine today, and then you are saying that we are doing a wonderful job. So not counting the costs, and actually people who have counted the costs, okay, you are ruining the ocean. What is the cost of cleaning up that pollution? You find that the growth is actually negative. So if you, this is counting the benefits. So for example, I extract oil and I sell it for $1 billion. All right, so I've made $1 billion of profit. This is growth. But what happened? What about the cost of that oil? Can we reproduce that oil? No. That oil is gone and it's a finite resource and it can never be recreated. Forget about oil. What about the thousands of species of animals that are going extinct today at a rate which is like a catastrophe? It has not happened since the Pliocene era that so many species went extinct because human beings are polluting the oceans, they are polluting the air, they are killing off the jungles and the river systems, and so animals are dying, fishes are dying, polar caps are melting, and possibly a huge environmental catastrophe. Many environmental scientists are saying that there is a lot of methane buried under the Arctic Sea, and if it melts, and if this methane is released into the atmosphere, it will mean death for all of us, because the planet will warm up and we can't breathe methane. So all of the costs are not counted in creating this hockey stick. Alright, so they say that, well, but okay, so maybe material prosperity you discount, but what about health? People are living longer. So you find that basically there is a deceptive average. Again, these are statistical tricks. So if you look at the GNP per capita, it is computed by taking all of the wealth and then dividing it equally before telling you what that number is. So similarly, if you take life expectancy, it means that you take the average over the whole population. You don't look at the population separately. If you break it down by income groups, then you find that there is a very strong class effect. So this is the effect of health on health. So you find that the poor people are reporting poor health in about 50% levels, whereas the rich people are only 5% in terms of reporting poor health. So the health benefits are not going equally to all groups. They are going in a very disproportionate way to the rich people. There is no relationship. So the growth is not what is buying life expectancy. This is a very strong argument that, okay, people are living longer. Whatever else you might say, this is the hockey stick again, that the people are living longer. Surely capitalism should be admired for allowing people, even the poor people are living longer. So here this graph shows that there is no relationship between GDP per capita and life expectancy in the rich countries. You have countries which have very low levels of in national income and very high levels. USA is among the highest, but it has relatively the lowest life expectancy among the rich countries. So basically, to achieve high life expectancy, you need only a small amount of income. And once you have achieved that, then you can get a very high life expectancy. After that, the additional growth does not buy you more life expectancy. It just buys you more inequality. And that's so growth is not needed to get life expectancy. It's just equity again. So this is the counter argument to the hockey stick. Also, there is the reverse hockey stick, which is created by looking at the costs. And actually, inequality itself is damaging. This is an argument which the economists have great difficulty with. They say that inequality by itself is not a problem. It is poverty which is a problem. See, inequality can exist in what is the harm of inequality? Yeah, exactly the Pareto argument that we saw. You take the richest, you make them richer. It doesn't damage the poor people. So now we are saying no, the inequality itself is harmful. If you take the rich and make them richer, it damages the poor people. Inequality itself kills. And there are many arguments which have been made, and they are reviewed in the book, about how social injustice actually is killing people. And you see that the poor people have much higher mortality rates. Infant mortality rates in the poor classes are very high. So even within the same country, we have large amounts of differences, and it is not due to absolute poverty, it's due to relative standing. And there are some very this is a complicated argument about basically the social gradient. Oh yes, that in a society, people who are at the bottom end, they suffer several kinds of emotional stresses which make them vulnerable to health problems. Even if they are absolutely better off, their relative position makes a big difference in their health status. So here there is a situation where you have income inequality and index of health and social problems, and you see that the USA has the highest income inequality, and it is the worst off in terms of health and social problems. It's an outlier. Most of the countries are lying on the straight line. So as you have less income inequality, you have better health outcomes. So basically, inequality itself is a source of social and health problems. Contrary to the economists that you can ignore inequality, you should only focus on poverty. Poverty is what causes health and social problems. So solve poverty. Don't touch the inequality. This is what the economists say. But we are saying no, inequality itself is the source of the social and health problems. So now we come to the next section, which is on more data and graphs about increasing inequality, how it has changed in the past few decades. Because basically, big picture is that inequality kept increasing until about 1929, the Great Depression. Then it went down between 1930 and 1980 for 50 years. And since 1980, it has been rocketing, skyrocketing. So we will discuss why that happened later, and I think I've given a talk on that earlier. But I just want to demonstrate. So here is the, you see the GDP per capita measure hides inequality. That's part of ET 1%, the economic theory for the 1%. They don't talk about how the GDP is distributed across the quintiles. Now, if you look at the what's happening, so the top two lines, the red and the light blue, are the income and wealth of the top 1%. So both of them have been on upward trend since 1970. The red and the black and the other line, the declining line, brown, these are the shares of the bottom 50%. So this has been declining. So the bottom 50% wealth has been going down, and the bottom 50% income has been going down. The income has been going down, the wealth has gone to zero, and below it's negative. The bottom 50% is actually in debt, so they have negative wealth. So this is how the GNP per capita will not show any of this because it averages all of the wealth, and it shows a healthy increasing trend. But actually, when you look at the bottom picture, then you see how inequitable it is, that the rich keep getting richer and the poor, bottom 50%, keep getting poorer. So if you look at what's happening in the income gains, so the economy is growing. It's not that the economy is not growing, but who is capturing all the gains since the poor are not getting any of it? So basically, the rich have been capturing all of the gains. So if you look at the income in the right panel, the top 1% is the red line. Their income has gone from 0.5 to 2 million. They have gone about 4 times as much as they used to in 1979. All the other classes, top 20%, second 20, third 20, first 20, bottom 20, they are just flat. They have, over the 30 years, they haven't gained anything. If you look at the share of income, then again the share of the wealthy has increased hugely. The share of the bottom classes, except for the second, the top 20%, the share has gone up a little bit. This is the intermediary class I have mentioned. There is a class which chooses to act as agents of the top 1%, and so they get some benefit, and they drive. If the whole population combined against the 1%, then the 1% would not have a chance. But the 1% bribes the top people like you to collaborate with them in oppressing the bottom 90%. And so then you can be part of the top 10%, you get good pays, and you will never become a millionaire, but you will live a comfortable life. In return for that, you help the rich to exploit the poor. This is the choice that is offered to the graduates of the top schools. The actual inequality, actual distribution of wealth is in the top bar, which shows how the top 20% have a huge amount, and the fourth 20% is barely visible, and the bottom 20% is actually invisible. Now, what the people, there is a lot of effort made to conceal this. So actually, the perception of what the Americans think inequality is much fairer. This is what the second graph is. The American think inequality is like that. Yani blue is is visible, whereas it is not, and the yellow is about a little bit more than half, whereas it is actually close more than 80%. So this is what their perception is. And what they think it should be is on the bottom line. So actual inequality is very bad, much worse than the perceived inequality. Perceived inequality is much worse than the desired inequality. This is what happened to the millionaires' tax rates. As I said, a period up to 1929 was a good one for the wealthy. the tax rates were very low, 1.6. But after the crash, people realized that these financial institutions have caused this depression, and they were out to punish them, and they did so. They increased the taxes to 66%, since 1980s, when Reagan-Thatcher revolution took place, then they have been trying to get these back down, and so now the taxes on the rich are now small. If you look at the share of federal tax revenue, the blue line, which is the largest, 40% and above, is the individual income tax. That's what ordinary people pay. The corporate tax, which is what the rich people are paying, is the red line going down. And the payroll tax, this is what the laborers pay, that has been going up. So basically the income transfer has been from the working class to the millionaire class. Now, nothing can be done without a theory to justify. So this tax gates for the rich is not just that. It is not done by saying that we are the rich and powerful and we will just act on our own tax cuts. They have a theory which they propound, and they say that basically it's the marginal productivity theory. The people are making millions because that's what they are contributing to society. If you tax them, then you will hurt the efficiency, because it will cut back on their productivity. And so a tax cut should be given to the rich people. If we take taxes and give them to the poor, they will just eat it. They will not invest, and so the growth will be harmed. So this is the economic theory of the 1%, ET 1%. It doesn't look at the welfare of the poor as anything significant, because they don't have any weight in the welfare function, because they have zero money, so they don't count for anything. This is a picture of the wealth inequality. So you look at the bottom square, which is the divided into 100, 10 by 10. So the bottom 90% has the little blue circle. Okay, that's the bottom 90%. Then the top 10% has the red circle. Okay, we are going from top to bottom. Now we look at the top 1%, that has the pink circle. Now we take this 1% and break it up into another 100 parts. Right? You follow? So now in that 100, so now we're looking at the top 1%. So in that top 1%, if you look at the top 1/10 of 1%, that's the yellow circle, the dark yellow circle. Now if you look at the 1% of the 1%, which is 0.01%, then they have a circle which cannot even be put into this diagram. It's so big. They have $27 million average income, whereas the top 1% only has 3 million. And all of the top 1% are millionaires. So you see the income inequality is much worse than you realize, because if you look at the fine details, so basically it's this top 1% of the top 1% which is actually in control of the world. So economic theory teaches you about the trickle-down effect, but actually what is true is the vacuum cleaner effect. What is happening is that all of the wealth is being sucked up from the poor and being carried up to the top in the loot bags of the rich. So this book lists how much money some of the billionaires made. Is it really that they are contributing that much to society? Well, there are many ways to show that it is not true. I mean, you can actually make the calculations. How much do they contribute? And you find that it is not. another way to document is Oxfam figures. They show that this process of concentration of wealth is very, very fast. In 2010, the number of people who owned half of the planetary wealth was about 315 or so. Then in 2016, this number is only 62. So 315 to 200 to 150 to 100 to 62. It's been going like that. I mean, half of the planetary wealth is concentrated in the hand of 62 people. So, what are the causes of this inequality? Well, the basic cause is political power of the wealthy. They are able to make the rules of the game. Not only that, more than that, they are able to tell the people that these are the, convince the people that this is the only way. There is no alternative. That's Tina. That's what Thatcher said. That this is the only system. This is the system that is best. It is necessary. It is efficient. It is just. It is ethical. These are all of the claims that your economic theory textbooks teach you. That this system is efficient. It works best. If you try to interfere, it will give you bad results, and so on and so forth. So, it's not just that, and Karl Marx first said this, that the capitalism works not just by exploiting the workers, but by convincing the workers that this is their own misery is necessary and required and fair and just for the system to work. So that you accept your role in the system as and you accept the system as being the best system. What Piketty shows in terms of the mechanism is that the wealthy have higher returns to their wealth. So if you look at an economic theory says that there is one equilibrium interest rate, but what Piketty shows is that no, the wealthier you are, the more you can earn on your as a return. So a wealthy person can make 25% on his money. A poor person who has the same amount of money can make only 3%. So obviously then, if this is the case, then the wealth disparity is going to keep on increasing. So the Citicorp released a secret report recently about, they invented the word plutonomy. And basically plutonomy is their word for saying that, the current economy is not like what is pictured in the textbooks where you have an average consumer. The economy is, there are two parts. There are the plutocrats, the billionaires, and they are the ones who are driving the economy. So if the average person is miserable, it makes no difference to the economy. That's not how we should, if you look at the economic outlooks as published by standard reports, this is what their secret reports meant for the investors say, you will be misled. This global financial crisis, it actually benefited the poor. So what is a tragedy for the homeowners is a celebration and a picnic for the billionaires. So we should, the secret reports say that basically we can ignore all of the doom and gloom in the public press about the possible catastrophe coming up. This makes no difference. The economy is a plutonomy. What matters is what's happening to the top 1% only. So in this confidential reports, they said that markets are friendly to rich, and so these trends towards the plutonomy will continue. The only possibility is if the poor people wake up at some point. They warn that there is the risk that one person, one vote is a threat to us, because at some point people might realize that the labor will fight back and there will be some political backlash, but they think it's not a serious risk. We can manage it. We have sufficiently strong control over the government and political institutions that we can manage the risk. So the cost that the society bears for the fact that the super rich are flaunting their wealth is huge. There is a huge amount of crime, and people have calculated these crimes occur because the rich flaunt their wealth. There is a huge amount of money which is being spent on security to protect the wealth of the rich from the poor who are in desperate situations. A very small amount of money is needed to eliminate poverty, but this is not a priority for the plutonomy. In fact, It is against the desires of the plutonomy. So one of the major problems that people have now started to pick up is that the great inequality is a threat to democracy, because these people are now in control of the political processes. And now this has been documented by many writers. The political theorists, political analysts have analyzed over bills in Congress, and they have said that in every single bill in which the interest of the top 1% clashes with the interest of the bottom 99%, the 1% win. So for example, this gun control, the vast majority of public in the USA is in favor, but the arms lobby, which makes a huge amount of money by arms sales, is against. So who wins? Not the majority, but the minority. It's not even possible to mention gun control in the Congress without committing political suicide. Obama was very strongly in favor of gun control, but he could not even bring it for consideration in the Congress, even though it is popular in the majority of the population. So this shows just you how the plutocracy has tied up the political system, and it serves their interests. It does not serve the interest of the public. And Manikiv, on the other hand, has written a paper called Defending the 1%. So he says that basically the same old argument that the rich are earning money because they are more productive, and we should allow them to earn money. What's the harm if somebody produces a lot of value for society? Let him get that what he's worth, and there is no harm to others from this doing so. So basically, I'm going to run a little over because there are a few more slides. There is a wrong diagnosis which has been made and a wrong solution which is being offered. The Keynesian prescription, I will skip this, and the quote which is worth reading. But basically what Keynes is saying, I summarize by saying that, first of all, he says that greed is a disgusting morbidity. It's a pathological, it's a psychological problem. I mean, it's not something that is a good thing. But Keynes says that if greed leads to accumulation of wealth, people hoard wealth, and therefore we should allow and encourage greed, because that will lead to the accumulation of wealth. And once the wealth accumulate, then we will use it to eliminate poverty. And also, he says that once people have enough wealth, then they will stop being greedy. They will become generous and they will become kind. Because now I have $1 million, then why should I earn another million? Now I have enough money, I can give to others, I can be compassionate, kind. So the people are, so this is the diagnosis which was Keynes made. They say, okay, greed is bad, but let us encourage it because it leads to accumulation of wealth, and wealth will solve all our problems. So this is the Quran says that this strategy will fail. The Quran says that accumulation of wealth will not solve the problems. So there are these, will not solve the problem, and there are these ayat which say that if you accumulate wealth, this will not solve the problems. And there is empirical evidence, which is the Easterlin paradox. Even though there has been massive gains in wealth, they have not led to increased happiness in Western societies. Similarly, Lane and Layard have written a book called The Loss of Happiness in Market Societies, which says that even though wealth have become 10, 30, even 100 times more, still people have not become happier. The suicide rate is increasing, alcoholism, broken families, all of the real determinants of wealth, of happiness, they are actually reducing. So money does not buy happiness. That's actually the title of his article. So Keynes thought that men will become generous and when they have wealth. That's how trickle-down can occur. You see, actually, if wealth accumulates, but it only stays in the hands of the wealthy, which is what is happening, and it is not shared by them with the poor, then no trickle-down will happen. And in fact, they will use that wealth to grab even more wealth from the poor, and this is exactly what is happening. So the Quran says that this will not be true, that if you give people more money, they will want even more, they will not become generous. And it has been noticed by people. The Samuelson said that, Samuelson was a disciple of Keynes, and he also thought that if we have great affluence, then society will become a kind and generous and compassionate society. But he noted that this is not true, this has not happened. The society has, even though we have become very, very affluent, the standards of living have increased by a huge amount. There is no slackening of economic ambition. People want more and more, and we live in a ruthless economy where people are willing to cut each other's throats for a small amount of money. So this has not brought about the happiness that they were on. And basically the morals and ideologies of Jahiliyyah have re-emerged. There's even the worst thing that used to happen in Jahiliyyah, which when I was young I used to think that at least we have become very civilized and we will not be burying our children in the living children. So this happens about 1,000 events where mothers kill their own child living in the USA, and there's a whole book called Mothers Who Kill Their Children about this phenomenon. So that is the last slide. Thank you for this.